There is something wonderfully deceptive about an ordinary evening on Earth. The lights of distant homes glow quietly beyond the windows. Somewhere, rain falls over an ocean. Someone is reading before bed. Someone else is watching the last colors disappear beneath the horizon. And overhead, the stars continue their patient journey across the darkness. It feels safe. It has always felt safe. Perhaps that is why human beings have spent so much of their history believing that the world beneath their feet was permanent. Our ancestors certainly hoped it was. Thousands of years ago, long before observatories and satellites, the night sky inspired to emotions in equal measure, wonder and fear. They watched comets appear without warning. They saw eclipses transform day into twilight. They observed stars that seemed fixed and eternal, unaware that many of them had already died long before their light reached Earth. To ancient civilizations, the heavens were not empty. They were alive with meaning. The sky carried omens, messages, warnings. Entire cultures rose beneath the belief that the universe was attempting to communicate with them. In some ways, perhaps we have not changed as much as we like to think, because even now, armed with telescopes and equations, we continue looking upward and asking the same question our ancestors once asked beside their fires. What is waiting for us out there? The difference, of course, is that we now understand something they could not. The universe never stands still. At this very moment, Earth is rotating at more than 1,000 kilometers per hour. It is orbiting the Sun at tremendous speeds. The Sun itself is moving through the Milky Way, and our galaxy continues its own silent journey through an expanding universe. Everything is moving, everything is changing, and somehow, amidst all of this motion, life found a way to emerge on one small world and convince itself that stillness was normal. There is something almost poetic about that, because stability, it turns out, is not the natural state of the cosmos. Change is. The stars understand this. Galaxies understand this. Even planets understand this. It is only human beings who occasionally forget. Throughout our history, countless objects have passed near Earth unnoticed. Asteroids drifting silently through the darkness. Fragments of ancient worlds crossing paths with our own. Most continue on their way, indifferent to our existence. A few leave scars. If you could look down upon Earth from far above, across millions of years, you would see that our planet carries the memory of these encounters, crater after crater, a quiet record written in stone. And yet, despite these reminders, each new generation awakens beneath the same assumption. Tomorrow will come, most of the time, it does. That is, perhaps, one of the greatest gifts the universe has ever given us, predictability. The sun rises. The seasons change. Life continues. But predictability should not be confused with certainty. Astronomers understand this better than most. Every day, telescopes scan the skies. Satellites watch the sun. Scientists track objects moving through the solar system with extraordinary precision. Humanity, in its own quiet way, has become a species that keeps watch, not because we are afraid, but because we have finally realized something our ancestors only suspected. The universe is beautiful, and beauty has never guaranteed safety. There is a strange comfort in acknowledging that, because for most of our existence, we lived without knowing what dangers might exist beyond our world. We did not know about asteroids. We did not understand supernovas. We had never heard of gamma ray bursts or solar storms powerful enough to silence an entire civilization. And yet, despite our ignorance, humanity endured. Generation after generation, century after century. There is another thought I often return to. Our survival has always depended upon a remarkable combination of intelligence, resilience, and something else that is more difficult to describe: luck. The asteroid that ended the age of the dinosaurs arrived 66 million years before humanity appeared. Had its timing been different, perhaps this conversation would never have existed. A nearby star could have lived a slightly different life. A collision could have occurred, A storm could have been stronger. History, it seems, is built upon an extraordinary number of fortunate circumstances. And perhaps nowhere is that more apparent than when we look beyond our atmosphere, because space is not merely the place where humanity hopes to travel someday. It is also the place from which many of our greatest threats may emerge. That realization can feel unsettling at first, but I find it strangely reassuring. After all, there is something deeply human about knowing that our story has never been guaranteed. Every civilization that has ever existed inherited the same uncertainty. Every generation loved, dreamed, and planned for a future it could not promise itself. And still, they continued. There is courage in that. As you listen tonight, though, perhaps not tonight, but on some quiet evening of your own choosing, I would like you to imagine the Earth as it truly is. Not as a map, not as a collection of nations, but as a small, luminous world suspended in a vast and restless cosmos. A world carrying forests, oceans, music, memories, and billions of lives. A world that has survived for more than 4 billion years beneath a sky that never stops changing. And somewhere above that world, beyond the moon and beyond the distant planets, the universe continues its endless motion. Silent, ancient, unconcerned, which brings us to an unavoidable question. If the end of our story ever arrived from the stars, what would humanity do? Would we fight? Would we flee? Would we endure, as we always have? Or would we simply do what human beings have done since the beginning? Look upward with equal parts wonder and fear, and try to understand what the universe is trying to tell us. For most of human history, the greatest dangers seem to come from Earth itself. Storms, floods, volcanoes, wars. Our ancestors feared the things they could see. Very few spent their nights worrying about objects drifting silently through the darkness beyond the atmosphere. And yet, one of the most important events in the history of life on Earth arrived not from the oceans or the mountains, but from the sky. 66 million years ago, on an ordinary day in the age of dinosaurs, a piece of the cosmos changed the destiny of our planet. The asteroid itself was not especially large by astronomical standards, roughly 10 kilometers across, a mountain traveling through space, but the universe has a remarkable way of reminding us that size is often relative. An object insignificant compared to a planet can still alter the course of life upon it. When it struck near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula, the impact released an amount of energy difficult to comprehend. The atmosphere ignited. Shockwaves traveled around the world. Forests burned. The skies darkened. And over time, nearly 75% of all species disappeared. The age of dinosaurs came to an end, and, in a strange twist of cosmic history, the path toward humanity quietly began. There is something unsettling about that thought. If not for a chance encounter between Earth and a wandering asteroid, mammals may never have inherited the world. You and I may never have existed. Our entire history, every city, every song, every story may ultimately trace itself back to a rock falling from the sky. It is a humbling realization. For centuries, humanity had no idea this had happened. The dinosaurs simply vanished into mystery. It was only in the late 20th century that scientists began piecing together the evidence. A layer of iridium found across the globe, shocked quartz, and eventually, buried beneath layers of rock and ocean, the enormous scar itself. The Chicxulub crater. Earth, it seems, remembers, even when we do not, and Chicxulub is not alone. Our planet is covered in scars. Most have faded with time, softened by wind, water, and the slow patience of geology. But they remain, silent reminders that the solar system is not an empty place. It is a place of motion, of collisions, of ancient objects still following paths established billions of years ago. This realization changed the way humanity looks at the sky. For the first time, we understood that extinction is not merely a biological phenomenon. It is also an astronomical one, and so we began to watch. Today, astronomers track thousands of near-Earth objects. These are asteroids and comets whose orbits bring them close to our planet. Most pose no danger. Many never come particularly near us. But every so often, a new object appears on our instruments, and humanity collectively performs a calculation it has never needed to perform before in its history. Will it miss? There is something profoundly modern about that question. Imagine explaining it to someone living 1,000 years ago. We have built machines that can detect mountains moving through the darkness millions of kilometers away. It would sound impossible. And yet, it is true. Every day, observatories around the world quietly scan the heavens. They catalog, measure, predict. Humanity has become a species that keeps an inventory of the sky. And perhaps that is one of our most extraordinary achievements, because unlike the dinosaurs, we have something they never possessed: awareness. There have been moments when this awareness arrived uncomfortably late. In 2013, an asteroid entered Earth's atmosphere above the Russian city of Chelyabinsk. It was relatively small, far too small to threaten civilization, but large enough to produce an explosion more powerful than many human-made weapons. Windows shattered across the city. Thousands were injured, mostly by flying glass. And perhaps the most surprising part of the event was this: no one saw it coming. It arrived from the direction of the sun, hidden within the glare of daylight. A reminder that even in an age of telescopes and satellites, the universe occasionally catches us by surprise. Fortunately, events like Chelyabinsk are rare. Truly catastrophic impacts are rarer still, but rare is not the same as impossible. And humanity has decided that impossible is a word best avoided when discussing asteroids. That decision has led to one of the most remarkable chapters in the history of our species. For the first time, humanity is no longer content merely to observe the cosmos. We are beginning to alter it. In 2022, a spacecraft named DART, the Double Asteroid Redirection Test, completed an extraordinary mission. Its objective was beautifully simple: find an asteroid, crash into it, and see if humanity could change its trajectory. There is something wonderfully human about that approach. Confronted with a cosmic threat, our first instinct was not surrender, it was experimentation. The target, a small asteroid moon named Dimorphos, posed no danger to Earth. It was chosen precisely because it offered a safe opportunity to test an idea that, one day, might save our world. And remarkably, it worked. Humanity successfully altered the orbit of an object in space. The change was small, measured in minutes, but the implications were enormous. For the first time in Earth's history, life demonstrated the ability to influence the movement of celestial bodies. That sentence still feels extraordinary. For billions of years, planets and asteroids moved according to the laws of gravity alone. Then, one day, a species emerged on a small blue world and gently nudged one of them aside. Perhaps that moment will be remembered by future generations, not as a technological achievement, but as the beginning of something larger, the moment humanity stopped being merely a passenger in the universe. Of course, there are limits to what we can do. A sufficiently large asteroid discovered too late would remain a formidable challenge. Time, as always, matters. If we detected a dangerous object decades in advance, our chances improve dramatically. Years are helpful, months are concerning, days are catastrophic, and so we continue to watch, patiently, carefully. Every telescope pointed toward the sky is, in its own way, an act of hope, a declaration that if the universe presents us with a challenge, we would at least like the opportunity to try. I find that deeply comforting, because throughout history, humanity has rarely controlled the events that shaped it. Ice ages came and went. Volcanoes erupted. Empires rose and fell. But now, for the first time, we possess the ability to look into the darkness and prepare ourselves for what might emerge from it. Perhaps the first great battle between humanity and the cosmos has already begun, not with explosions, not with armies, but with scientists quietly watching the stars and asking a simple question every evening before they leave their observatories. Is everything still where it is supposed to be? And most nights, the answer is yes. Most nights, the sky remains kind, but somewhere beyond the distant planets, countless ancient stones continue their endless journey through the darkness, unaware that one small world has finally begun watching them in return. There is a comforting habit shared by nearly everyone who has ever lived. Each morning, we expect the sun to rise, and each evening, we expect it to set. The sun has kept this promise for all of human history. It illuminated the first cities. It warmed the oceans long before our species appeared. It watched civilizations emerge, flourish, and disappear. To us, it feels permanent, dependable, almost gentle. But stars are not gentle things. They are immense nuclear furnaces, balancing gravity and fire in a delicate dance that can continue for billions of years. And while our sun is remarkably stable compared to many stars scattered throughout the cosmos, it remains exactly what it has always been, a star. There is something strangely unsettling about remembering that. Because stars do not exist for us, they do not know we are here. And occasionally, they remind the universe of their true nature. Our sun, for example, is constantly active. Its surface twists and moves beneath powerful magnetic fields. Enormous loops of plasma rise and fall across its atmosphere. Most of the time, these events are harmless, invisible, little more than distant activity occurring 93 million miles away. But every so often, the sun becomes restless. It releases tremendous bursts of energy known as solar flares. Sometimes, these are accompanied by coronal mass ejections, vast clouds of charged particles hurled into space at extraordinary speeds. When directed toward Earth, they encounter something we rarely think about: our planet's magnetic field. This invisible shield surrounds the Earth like a quiet guardian. For billions of years, it has deflected dangerous particles streaming from the sun. Without it, life on our planet would have faced a much more difficult existence. Perhaps it would never have appeared at all. We rarely stop to appreciate invisible protections. Air, gravity, magnetic fields. They ask for nothing. They simply continue doing their work. And yet, even these protections have limits. In 1859, humanity received a brief glimpse of what an unusually powerful solar storm can do. It began with an astronomer named Richard Carrington observing an unexpected flash of light on the surface of the sun. Hours later, Earth responded, or as illuminated skies far closer to the equator than usual. People reportedly read newspapers beneath their light during the night. Telegraph systems, the most advanced communication technology of the era, began behaving strangely. Some operators received electric shocks. Others discovered their equipment continued functioning even after being disconnected from power sources. The event lasted only a short time, and then it passed. Today, we call it the Carrington event. At the time, it was little more than an extraordinary curiosity. But if an event of similar magnitude occurred now, the consequences would be considerably different. Modern civilization depends upon fragile things: satellites, electrical grids, communication networks, navigation systems. Our world is more connected than at any point in history, which also means it is more vulnerable. A sufficiently powerful solar storm would not end humanity, but it might temporarily remind us how much of our daily lives depend upon invisible systems quietly operating in the background. There is a curious irony in that, for thousands of years, human beings feared the darkness. Now, perhaps, we fear losing the lights. Still, the sun is not the greatest stellar threat the universe can imagine. Not even close. Scattered throughout the cosmos are stars far stranger than our own. Some are born with masses many times greater than the sun, and when these giants approach the end of their lives, they do not simply fade away. They explode. A supernova is one of the most energetic events in the universe. For a brief moment, a single star can outshine an entire galaxy. Elements forged within its core are scattered across space, eventually becoming part of new stars, new planets, and perhaps, one day, new forms of life. There is poetry in that. Every atom of iron in your blood was created inside a dying star. In a very literal sense, we are descendants of ancient explosions. But supernovas are generous only at a distance, too close, and their beauty becomes something else entirely. Fortunately, the nearest stars capable of becoming supernovas do not currently pose an immediate danger to Earth. The universe, at least in this regard, appears to have granted us some breathing room. Still, astronomers occasionally identify candidates. Betelgeuse, the great red star in the constellation Orion, receives particular attention. One day, it will explode, not tomorrow, not next year, perhaps not for another 100,000 years, but eventually, one of the most recognizable stars in our sky will briefly become bright enough to cast shadows at night. I sometimes wonder what future generations will think when that happens. Will they gather beneath the sky in silence? Will they celebrate? Or will they simply stand in awe, reminded once again that stars are living things with stories of their own? And then there are neutron stars. If ordinary stars are remarkable, neutron stars feel almost impossible. Imagine compressing the mass of the sun into a sphere no larger than a city. Matter itself begins behaving strangely under such conditions. A single teaspoon of neutron star material would weigh billions of tons. These objects spin rapidly, emit powerful radiation, and occasionally produce events of astonishing violence. Fortunately, space is vast, extraordinarily vast. Distance remains one of humanity's greatest allies, but there is one cosmic phenomenon that even astronomers speak of with a certain respect: gamma ray bursts. For a few brief moments, they become the brightest events in the observable universe. They release more energy in seconds than our sun will produce over its entire lifetime. Most occur unimaginably far away, and that is very good news, because a sufficiently nearby gamma ray burst directed toward Earth could have profound consequences. It would not shatter continents or boil oceans. Instead, it might alter the atmosphere itself. The ozone layer could be damaged. Life on the surface would suddenly face a very different relationship with sunlight. There is no evidence that such an event threatens Earth in the foreseeable future, but the possibility exists, and perhaps that is what makes the universe so fascinating. It operates on scales that continuously challenge our imagination. An asteroid reminds us that planets are vulnerable. A solar storm reminds us that stars are active. A supernova reminds us that even suns have endings. And gamma ray bursts remind us that the cosmos is capable of astonishing displays of power. Yet despite all of this, here we are, after 4 billion years of planetary history, after countless extinctions and catastrophes, still listening to the wind, still building telescopes, still asking questions. There is a resilience to life that I find deeply moving. The universe has never promised safety. It has only offered possibility, and somehow, against extraordinary odds, possibility was enough. Perhaps that is why we continue looking upward, not because we expect the stars to protect us, but because understanding them feels like another way of understanding ourselves. Because every threat the cosmos presents also carries a lesson about fragility, about survival, about the remarkable coincidence that allows conscious beings to exist long enough to contemplate the very forces that might one day erase them. And maybe that is the greatest mystery of all, that in a universe capable of producing supernovas, gamma ray bursts, and stars powerful enough to illuminate entire galaxies, it also found time to create quiet evenings on Earth, and people willing to spend them wondering what waits beyond the sky. Part 4. The universe on a cosmic scale. There is a tendency among human beings to think in terms of immediacy. Tomorrow, next year. Perhaps, if we are feeling ambitious, the next century. Our lives are measured in moments. The universe, however, has always preferred patience. It thinks in millions of years the way we think in afternoons. And sometimes, when we allow ourselves to consider its true time scales, something curious happens. Our greatest fears begin to feel strangely small, because asteroids, solar storms, and distant supernovas are not the only endings written into the fabric of reality. The universe itself has a future, and like all futures, it is uncertain. If you could somehow leave Earth tonight and travel far enough into space, you would eventually notice something remarkable. Our sun is not special. It is one star among hundreds of billions in the Milky Way, a perfectly ordinary star orbiting the center of a perfectly ordinary galaxy. For a species that has spent much of its history imagining itself at the center of creation, this realization was not easy to accept. Copernicus removed Earth from the center of the solar system. Later, astronomers removed the solar system from the center of the galaxy. And eventually, we discovered that even our galaxy is merely one among trillions. Each discovery carried the same quiet message. The universe is larger than we imagined, and yet, somehow, no less beautiful. Our galaxy itself is in motion. Everything within it is moving. The sun orbits the galactic center at extraordinary speeds, completing a single journey every 230 million years. The last time our solar system occupied its current position in the galaxy, dinosaurs still walked the Earth. There is something wonderfully humbling about that. Human civilization has existed for only the briefest fraction of a single galactic year, and the Milky Way is not standing still either. Across the darkness, another galaxy approaches us. You have almost certainly seen it before, though perhaps without realizing it. The Andromeda Galaxy, a vast spiral of stars located more than 2 million light-years away. To the naked eye, it appears as a faint smudge in the night sky, quiet, unremarkable, but appearances, as the universe repeatedly reminds us, can be deceiving. Andromeda is moving toward us at approximately 100 kilometers per second, not because it wishes to. Galaxies do not possess intentions, only gravity. In roughly 4 billion years, the Milky Way and Andromeda will begin one of the most extraordinary events in cosmic history. They will collide. At first, the word sounds alarming. Collision suggests violence, destruction, chaos, but galaxies are mostly empty space. Stars are separated by distances so vast that direct impacts are unlikely. Instead, the two galaxies will slowly pass through one another, their shape stretching and changing across hundreds of millions of years. Future skies, if future eyes exist to witness them, will be extraordinary. Andromeda will grow larger each night. Eventually, it will dominate the heavens. Entire new patterns of stars will emerge overhead. It is difficult to imagine such a sky. And perhaps that is because humanity evolved beneath one that changed very little. There is comfort in familiarity. The stars of our ancestors are largely the stars we know today. But the universe makes no promises about permanence. Even galaxies are temporary arrangements. This realization becomes even more profound when we consider the stars themselves. Stars are born, they live, and eventually, they die. Some quietly fade into white dwarfs. Others explode in spectacular supernovas. Over immense stretches of time, fewer and fewer new stars will appear. The universe, though still young by cosmic standards, is slowly changing. Billions of years from now, the night sky may look very different. Imagine a civilization existing so far in the future that distant galaxies have disappeared from view. Because the universe is expanding, and it has been expanding since the beginning. This expansion is one of the most extraordinary discoveries humanity has ever made. Galaxies are moving away from one another, carried by the stretching fabric of space itself. The farther away a galaxy is, the faster it appears to recede. And eventually, given enough time, many galaxies will move beyond the observable universe entirely. Future astronomers may inherit a lonelier cosmos. They may never know that billions of galaxies once filled the heavens. They may look outward and see only darkness beyond their local group of stars. There is something profoundly melancholy about that thought, that we exist at a moment in cosmic history when the universe still allows itself to be seen. As though, for a brief moment, the curtains have been drawn back, and we happen to arrive just in time. But even this is not the end of the story, because the universe itself appears to possess a future. Scientists continue to debate its ultimate fate, but several possibilities remain. Perhaps expansion continues forever. Stars eventually exhaust their fuel. Galaxies grow dark. The cosmos slowly drifts toward a state sometimes called the heat death of the universe, a future so distant that language struggles to describe it. No stars, no sunlight, only the lingering memory of a once luminous cosmos. Or perhaps something stranger awaits. The universe has surprised us before. It may do so again. What I find most fascinating is not that everything ends. It is that everything exists at all. Against impossible odds, atoms assembled themselves into stars. Stars forged heavier elements, planets formed, life emerged. And eventually, a species appeared capable of contemplating the fate of galaxies. There is a quiet miracle hidden within that sequence of events, because the universe did not merely create stars. It created beings capable of missing them before they are gone. Perhaps that is why contemplating cosmic time scales feels simultaneously comforting and unsettling. Yes, everything is temporary: continents, species, civilizations, even galaxies. But temporariness does not diminish meaning. If anything, it may be the source of it. A sunset is beautiful precisely because it does not last forever. A song matters because eventually it ends, and perhaps the same is true of worlds. There is an uncomfortable thought hidden beneath all of this. Everything we know is temporary: the Earth, the Sun, the Milky Way. Even the universe itself may one day become something entirely different. And yet, despite this, humanity continues making plans for tomorrow. There is something wonderfully stubborn about us. We plant trees whose shade we will never enjoy. We build observatories to study stars that will outlive our species. We tell stories beneath a sky that has no obligation to remember us. And somehow, that feels important, because perhaps our purpose was never to outlast the cosmos. Perhaps it was simply to witness it, to exist during this brief, extraordinary chapter in the history of reality and say, we were here, and we looked up. The universe, for all its immensity, may never know our names. But for a fleeting moment, we knew its, and perhaps that is enough. Because in a cosmos where even galaxies are temporary, there is something deeply beautiful about being alive at all, especially on a small world, orbiting an ordinary star, in an ordinary galaxy, just before bedtime, beneath a sky that continues to remind us how extraordinary ordinary things can be. There is a pattern that appears again and again throughout human history. The ice advances, and we adapt. The seas rise, and we adapt. A disease spreads across continents, and somehow, despite grief and uncertainty, we adapt once more. Human beings are not the strongest creatures that have ever lived. We are not the fastest. We possess neither claws nor armor, and yet, against all expectations, we remain here. Perhaps our greatest talent has never been survival itself. Perhaps it has always been our refusal to stop trying. So, if the end ever threatened to arrive from the stars, I suspect our first response would not be panic. It would be observation, because that is what our species does when confronted by the unknown. We watch, we measure, we ask questions, and eventually, we begin building things. Imagine, for a moment, that astronomers discover an approaching threat, not an immediate one, perhaps an asteroid decades away, or evidence of a distant stellar event that will eventually affect our world. The first hours would likely be filled with disbelief, then confirmation, and then something remarkable would happen. For perhaps the first time in history, every human being would realize they are part of the same story. There is something strangely beautiful about that thought. Borders would suddenly seem less important, arguments quieter. The sky, after all, does not recognize nations. An asteroid does not care what language we speak. The universe has always treated humanity as a single species. Perhaps it would take a cosmic threat to remind us of that. Governments would mobilize. Scientists would work without rest. Observatories across the planet would share data continuously. Somewhere, in brightly lit rooms filled with exhausted people and cups of forgotten coffee, humanity would begin doing what it has always done best, trying. There is a tendency to underestimate our species. And admittedly, we provide plenty of reasons for doing so. But history offers another perspective. In only a few thousand years, we progressed from stone tools to spacecraft. We split the atom, mapped the human genome, walked upon another world. If survival remained possible, I suspect humanity would pursue it with extraordinary determination. One possibility often discussed by scientists and futurists is the construction of underground cities. At first, the idea sounds almost disappointing. After dreaming of the stars for so long, we retreat beneath the earth, and yet, there is a certain poetry in it. Returning to the planet that protected us for billions of years, deep beneath the surface, entire communities could survive events that make life above impossible. The Earth itself would become our shelter. There are already places on our planet that hint at this future. Underground laboratories, subterranean transit systems, cities carved into stone by civilizations long gone. Human beings, it seems, have always possessed an instinct to seek refuge beneath the ground when the world above becomes uncertain. Of course, some would inevitably look upward instead. There has always been a part of humanity that sees the stars not as a threat, but as an invitation. What if Earth could no longer protect us? Could the moon? At first glance, our celestial companion seems an unlikely refuge. Its surface is exposed to radiation. Temperatures fluctuate dramatically. There is no atmosphere. And yet, for decades, scientists have imagined lunar habitats buried beneath layers of dust and rock, small communities living beneath artificial skies, children growing up beneath 1/6 of Earth's gravity, entire generations looking toward a distant blue world hanging silently in their sky. I wonder what stories they would tell about us. Would Earth become a memory? A place spoken of with the same mixture of nostalgia and fascination with which we speak of ancient civilizations. And then, inevitably, there is Mars, humanity's favorite second home, or perhaps, more accurately, our favorite possibility. Mars appears repeatedly in our dreams of survival. Its days are similar in length to our own. Water exists beneath its surface. It is close enough to reach and distant enough to inspire us. But Mars has always asked a difficult question in return. Are you certain you wish to live here? Because Mars is not waiting for us. It is cold, dry, silent. Its atmosphere is too thin to breathe. Its gravity is too weak to feel familiar. Every moment of survival would depend upon machines continuing to function. A colony on Mars may preserve humanity, but it would also transform it. There is an important distinction between surviving somewhere and belonging there. Still, if given the choice between extinction and adaptation, I suspect humanity would choose adaptation. We always have, and perhaps we would not face that future alone. Artificial intelligence may become one of our greatest companions in the centuries ahead. Machines do not require oxygen. They do not suffer from loneliness in the same way we do. They can endure environments that would quickly overwhelm human beings. It is entirely possible that if humanity ever leaves Earth permanently, it will do so alongside intelligences of its own creation. I find that thought unexpectedly comforting. After all, every generation leaves something behind for the next. Perhaps our greatest legacy will not be monuments or cities, but companions capable of continuing the journey when we no longer can. And if nearby worlds prove insufficient, humanity may eventually consider something even more ambitious. Generation ships, entire civilizations built within enormous spacecraft, not carrying explorers, carrying descendants. Imagine boarding a vessel knowing that neither you nor your children nor your grandchildren will ever see its destination, a journey lasting centuries, perhaps millennia. People born beneath artificial skies, living entire lives between the stars. For them, the ship would not be transportation, it would be home. There is something both beautiful and heartbreaking about that idea. To become a species so determined to survive that it willingly entrusts its future to people who will never remember the world where the journey began. And yet, if history has taught us anything, it is that human beings are remarkably good at finding meaning in unfamiliar places. Perhaps children born aboard such vessels would not feel sadness. Perhaps they would simply feel curiosity. After all, every human being in history was born into a world they did not choose. And still, somehow, they learned to love it. Eventually, every discussion about survival arrives at the same question. What if Earth truly could no longer sustain us? What if, despite all our efforts, the only path forward required leaving behind the world that gave us life? Would we go? I think we would, reluctantly, with tears in our eyes and memories in our hearts. But we would go, not because humanity lacks love for Earth, quite the opposite. We would leave because Earth taught us something essential, that life is precious, and precious things are worth carrying forward. Perhaps that is the great paradox of our species. We are born from a single world, and yet we spend our lives wondering what exists beyond its horizon. Maybe that curiosity is not a flaw. Maybe it is a survival mechanism written into us by the universe itself. A quiet instruction carried across generations. Keep going, keep looking, keep trying. Because if the end ever comes from the stars, I suspect humanity will respond the same way it always has, with fear, with hope, and with the stubborn determination to see one more sunrise, wherever that sunrise may be. Even if, one day, it rises over an entirely different world, there is a question hidden beneath every conversation about survival. It is a question we rarely ask out loud, not because it is unpleasant, but because, somewhere deep within us, we already know the answer. What if there isn't enough time? Humanity has become remarkably skilled at solving problems. When rivers flooded, we built bridges. When diseases spread, we created medicine. When the distance between continents felt insurmountable, we learned to fly. Progress has quietly taught us to believe that every obstacle has a solution waiting to be discovered. And perhaps most of the time, it does. But the universe is under no obligation to provide us with enough time to find it. Imagine, for a moment, that the warning arrives too late. Not decades, not years, only days. Perhaps hours. The details hardly matter. Only the certainty. Humanity would face something it has avoided for most of its existence, a deadline shared by every living person. There is something extraordinary about that thought. For the first time in history, every human being would wake up beneath the same sky carrying the same knowledge. And I wonder what we would do. Would cities fall silent? Would people gather with those they love? Would telescopes remain pointed toward the stars until the very end? History offers us a few clues, because while humanity has never faced the end of the world, we have always lived with the possibility of endings. Entire civilizations have disappeared. Empires that once believed themselves eternal now exist only in books. And yet, across thousands of years, one thing remains remarkably consistent. Human beings continue trying to leave something behind. Ancient cultures understood this well. The Egyptians built monuments intended to outlive memory. The Greeks preserved stories. Medieval monks copied manuscripts by candlelight, ensuring that knowledge would survive uncertain times. Again and again, our species has behaved as though existence becomes more meaningful when shared with the future. Perhaps that instinct would remain with us until the very end. Imagine libraries opening their doors without locks. museums illuminated throughout the night, people recording messages for descendants who may never exist. Somewhere, a musician composing one final song. Elsewhere, a parent telling a child a story that has been passed from one generation to the next for centuries. There is a quiet dignity in these acts because survival, it turns out, is not merely biological. It never has been. Civilizations survive through memory, through art, through ideas, long after individuals are gone. I sometimes think about the Voyager golden records. Small golden discs attached to spacecraft currently drifting beyond the solar system. They carry music, greetings in dozens of languages, the sounds of rain, birds, and human laughter. Carl Sagan once described them as a message placed in a cosmic bottle. There is something profoundly human about that. Faced with the infinite silence of space, our response was to send music. Not instructions, not demands, just evidence that, for a little while, we were here. And perhaps, if humanity ever faced its final chapter, we would do the same once more. We would preserve our stories, our poems, our photographs. We would gather together everything that makes us human and place it gently into the hands of the future, even if no future remained to receive it. Because hope has never depended entirely upon certainty. There is another question worth asking. How would we wish to be remembered? Not by other civilizations, not by the universe. The cosmos, after all, has never shown much interest in remembrance. Stars do not mourn. Galaxies do not keep records. But perhaps remembrance has always been something we do for ourselves. Would we wish to be remembered as conquerors, as builders, as dreamers, or simply as a species that loved its small world very deeply? I suspect the answer would vary from person to person. But I also suspect many of us would arrive at the same conclusion, that despite all our mistakes and there have been many, humanity has spent its brief existence attempting something extraordinary. We tried to understand. We looked at atoms and galaxies with equal curiosity. We wrote symphonies, painted caves, walked on the moon, fell in love, cried beneath unfamiliar skies. There is something beautiful about a species capable of doing all of those things. Perhaps survival was never the only measure of success. Perhaps meaning matters too. Different cultures have spent thousands of years contemplating the end of the world. Some imagined fire, others imagined floods. Some believed the stars themselves would fall from the heavens. Yet hidden within nearly every one of these stories is an unexpected idea. Not fear, acceptance, an understanding that all things, eventually, reach their conclusion. The universe appears comfortable with endings. Stars end, galaxies change. Even time itself may possess limits we do not yet understand. Why, then, should humanity expect to be different? And yet there is a difference. The universe does not know that it exists. We do. That may be the rarest thing of all. Somewhere, on this small world, the cosmos became aware of itself. It learned to ask questions. It learned to wonder what lies beyond the horizon. And if our story someday ends, that achievement remains no less extraordinary. I think that realization changes the question entirely. Instead of asking, how long can humanity survive? Perhaps we should ask, what did humanity choose to do with the time it was given? Because in the end, time has always been the one thing we could never negotiate with. And maybe that is why sunsets feel beautiful, why music moves us, why we hold onto moments we know cannot last. Impermanence does not diminish meaning. It creates it. So, if the end ever came from the stars, and if there truly were no escape, I do not believe humanity's final act would be one of despair. I think it would be one of connection. People finding one another, stories being shared, eyes turning upward one final time, and perhaps, somewhere beneath a darkening sky, someone would whisper the same words our ancestors have carried across thousands of years. We were here, not forever, but long enough. Long enough to understand the stars, long enough to wonder what they meant, and long enough to realize that existence itself, however brief, was always an extraordinary gift. By now, we have imagined asteroids crossing the darkness. We have stood beneath the light of dangerous stars. We have watched galaxies move slowly toward one another across billions of years. And together, we have asked one of the oldest questions our species has ever carried. What would we do if the end came from space? It is a difficult question, but perhaps there is another question hidden quietly behind it. Why do we ask it at all? Human beings are curious creatures. Long before we understood what stars were, we gave them names. Long before we knew the Earth was a planet, we imagined journeys beyond it. There is something deeply unusual about that. After all, evolution did not require us to understand galaxies. Our ancestors could have lived perfectly successful lives without ever wondering about black holes or the origins of the cosmos. And yet, somewhere along the way, we became a species incapable of looking upward without asking questions. Perhaps curiosity is not merely something we possess. Perhaps it is something we are. There is a thought that returns to me whenever I consider the vastness of the universe. Out of everything that exists, the stars, the nebulae, the endless oceans of darkness, one of the rarest things we know of is consciousness. As far as we can tell, the universe spent nearly 14 billion years becoming capable of asking itself what it is. And somehow, improbably, it did so through us. There is an extraordinary humility hidden within that idea, because it suggests that humanity's significance does not come from our size, or our strength, or even our longevity. It comes from our awareness, the ability to stand beneath a sky filled with ancient light and feel something: wonder, gratitude, curiosity, perhaps even love. The cosmos is unimaginably large. It contains more stars than there are grains of sand on all the beaches of Earth. And yet, among all that immensity, there exists a small world covered in oceans and forests where living beings pause at the end of the day and ask themselves what it all means. That feels important, not because the universe requires it, but because the universe allowed it. Throughout our history, humanity has survived challenges that once seemed impossible. Ice ages, famines, pandemics, wars. Again and again, we found reasons to continue. There is a resilience to our species that I find difficult not to admire. We are fragile. Certainly, a cosmic perspective makes that impossible to ignore. An asteroid could alter our history. A nearby supernova could reshape our future. Even our sun, faithful as it has been, will not shine forever. And yet, despite all of this, humanity continues making plans. Children continue imagining tomorrow. Scientists continue building telescopes. Someone, somewhere, is still falling in love beneath the stars. Life, it seems, has a remarkable habit of continuing. Perhaps that is what the universe has been trying to teach us all along. Not that we are insignificant, but that significance was never measured by permanence. A candle that burns briefly still produces light. A song that lasts only a few minutes can remain in memory for a lifetime. And perhaps civilizations are not so different. Maybe our purpose was never to outlive the stars. Maybe it was simply to witness them, to exist during this brief chapter of cosmic history and say, "We saw you." There is a certain comfort in accepting our fragility. It allows us to appreciate ordinary things more deeply: the sound of rain against a window, the warmth of sunlight on a quiet morning, the familiar faces of people we love. These things often feel small, but perhaps they only seem small because we experience them every day. The universe, after all, is not composed solely of galaxies and black holes. It is also composed of quiet moments. And if consciousness is truly as rare as it appears to be, then every moment of awareness becomes something extraordinary. I sometimes imagine future historians, whether human or otherwise, looking back upon our species. What would they remember? Perhaps they would remember that we were imperfect, that we argued, that we stumbled, that we occasionally forgot how precious our world truly was. But I hope they would remember something else as well, that we never stopped looking up, that despite every uncertainty, we remained curious, that even while knowing the universe could one day bring our story to an end, we still chose to learn its language. There is courage in that, not the courage of heroes and stories, but the quieter courage of ordinary people continuing to find meaning in an uncertain world. And perhaps that is enough, because if the end ever comes from the stars, and one day, in some form, it inevitably will, I do not believe the universe will measure us by how long we survived. I think it will measure us by something much simpler. Did we notice? Did we appreciate the improbable gift we were given? Did we spend our brief time beneath the stars trying to understand them? There is one final thought I would like to leave with you. For billions of years, the universe existed in silence. Then, on one small planet orbiting one ordinary star, something remarkable happened. Matter learned to think, and once it learned to think, it immediately began asking questions. Questions about life, questions about death, questions about distant galaxies and the possibility of endings written among the stars. Perhaps that was always the point, not to conquer the universe, not to survive forever, but to bear witness, to be the part of the cosmos capable of looking back upon itself with wonder. So, if the end ever comes from the stars, perhaps the true measure of humanity will not be found in our final moments. It will be found in all the moments that came before, in every telescope pointed toward the heavens, in every child who asked what lies beyond the moon, in every story told beneath a quiet night sky, and in the simple, extraordinary fact that for a brief moment in the history of the universe, we were here. We lived, we wondered, and we understood, if only for an instant, that we had never been separate from the stars. We had been made from them all along. And perhaps that is the most comforting thought of all to carry with you into the night, that the universe did not merely surround us. For a little while, it became us. And through us, it learned what it feels like to wonder.